What's up, guys? This is Bolt Struck with Duck, and today I have some unpopular things to say. So we're going over the Chargers win over the Denver Broncos, and I know it's sucky to talk about, negative things after a win, and I do say these things with love, right? There's half of fan bases are typically overly critical on teams, and then the other half of the fan base is like anyone who's critical of the team isn't a fan. I do say this with love. I do, I am a Chargers fan. But, couple complaints about this game where it's like scarily Chargers of the Chargers, even under Jim Harbaugh, where it's just like, God, you're just screaming at the TV, like, stick with what works. Like, why do the Chargers historically take their foot off the gas? It's like, you saw the Lions game against the Cowboys. It's like, they're running trick plays on fourth down, at the 40-yard line when they're up, 35 points. And it's like, I'm not saying you have to be that extreme, but it's like this incredibly soft coverage, which I don't want to get too mad at Jesse Minter. He's been having a masterclass this season. But then with Greg Roman, it's like you go out, you see Justin Herbert be that top 5 quarterback we know he can be, just dotting people up and trusting him on third down. I would, unless it's like 3rd and 1 or shorter, I would pass the ball. I would trust the ball in Herbert's hand 90% of the time. But Greg Roman sees that, like the reason they were so successful, their first 10 plays, 9 out of 10 of them were pass plays. And then you get to the second half, and it's back to that predictable run scheme that Greg Roman is doing. Even in the first half, he had some nice, motions, a little bit of trickery, getting Darius Davis involved, I always love. And then it was just back to like, run on first, run on second, and it's like no variation. And it's like just getting away from what works. Like, I understand trying to run the clock out with a big lead, but at the same time, when you're so dominant on the offensive side and the defensive side, you might as well just stick with what works, because any variation might mess that up, and it did. Again, it sucks being negative, but this is thinking on the future of the season, because you're supposed to, quote unquote, beat this rebuilding Broncos team. Getting into a positive, it's Kamani Vidal season. I've been a big fan of him going into this year. I don't know why it took them so long to get him in with how poorly Gus Edwards has been playing. Gus Edwards is on the IR. So 2 parts to this. One, I hate saying this, but maybe blessing in disguise, at least getting a look at Vidal. And then 2, maybe Gus Edwards has been so ineffective because he's been hurt. We know he was coming off an injury into the season, but now him being on the IR, I think, is further clarification where he probably wasn't playing to the best of his abilities, which, is a bad thing that he's hurt, but maybe he needed, the rest. So it's minimum 4 weeks off. Same thing with Asante Samuel Jr. Like, what happened to that guy? It seemed like he was on all-pro trajectory. In the complaints about him, early on in his career or pre this year, is he was very hit or miss. Like, he'd either be, all-pro level or he was getting torched. I know he's undersized, so things like missing tackles and stuff is going to happen. But he's just been so bad this season. And then, at least in this first half, the secondary looks so much better without him. I hope he can return. Maybe it's this same thing with Gus Edwards. Maybe he's just playing banged up and we just didn't know. And kind of speaking of the secondary, that was the worst touchdown call ever since the Dez Bryant touchdown. And at least the Dez Bryant touchdown was tricky because it was essentially the catalyst for establishing what a catch was in the new catch rules. But the fact that you could review that, clearly see the ball moving and tilting, like the rule book says the ground can't assist you in a catch. If the ground wasn't there, he wouldn't have completed the catch. The ball was coming out. I'm shocked. Even Gene Steratore said it. And one of the things I hate about the NFL is you can tell they always tell like the announcers, like, don't disagree with the refs. I would have loved the announcers, after to be like, nah, that was a horrible call. The refs need accountability, and you're never going to get that from the announcers. Even though for some reason before Gene Steratore, they thought it was close. I didn't think it was close. But, whatever. So, next 5 games, the Chargers play teams that are a combined 8-21. Which is good, right? But let's hold on. Let's look at those teams. So you have the Cardinals, who I'm higher on Kyler Murray than other people. You got the Saints, who are without Derek Carr, but they have looked really, really good at some points this year. You have the Browns, who their offense is horrible, but they do have Nick Chubb back. Their defense is always good. The Titans, who are just a weird team. And then the Bengals, who are just always horrible to start the season, but by the time the Chargers play them, that's around the time they're rolling. So theoretically, with the next 5 games coming up against a combined 8-21 record, none of these 5 teams have a winning record. You hear that and you're like, oh, should be, 4-1 through the next 5 games. But that's a gauntlet. The only gimme is probably the Titans. And then the Saints, because you're assuming Spencer Rattler. But it's a harder stretch than the record says. So I don't know. If you can go 3-2 through that stretch, I think you take that. That would be 6-4 coming out of there. And then just last thing I want to say, and this is an unpopular take, but it's like, oh my God, this Chargers team can be a little bit boring, And I know the point of the game is to win, but the point of watching the game is also to have fun. And I talked about this going into the year, where it's like, outside of Herbert, who are you personally rooting for? And yeah, it just makes me sad, Keenan scoring those 2 touchdowns for the Bears, Mike Williams, was a fun guy to root for. And it's, not that these other guys aren't great, but it's like, I haven't seen a ton from these guys. Maybe I just, need the Chargers social media team to, show off some of their personalities a little bit more. But it's on an individual level. I'm always rooting for a win and Herbert to throw 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. But it's one of those things that's like, I don't care who he throws the touchdown to. It's weird. I know that'll change because you would assume a lot of these guys are going to stay with the team. But it's just weird still having so many new names on the Chargers. And I know that's unpopular. If we fast forward and they win the Super Bowl, I'm not going to care about, that we're throwing the ball to Hayden Hurst and I know nothing about him and he's, this, one of his last stints of his career as a Charger. He's not going to be remembered as a Charger. No offense to Hayden Hurst. But it is weird. But again, minor complaint. Winning fixes all. But so now we are on to the Cardinals Monday primetime game. I will have a video going over my predictions for that game later this week. But let me know how you guys feel about the win. And specifically, Greg Roman and the Chargers in general. Let me know down in the comments below. Make sure to like the video, subscribe for more Chargers content, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.